every time we think we're past it in the Pac-12, it just rears its ugly head again, again and again. And we are going to talk about this question of $50 million per school per season coming up. But a very interesting note from sources today talking about the latest situation with the Pac-12 legal situation. We're told on the show that the Pac-2, Oregon State and Washington State, have been talking, their representation has been talking to the exiting 10 members of the Pac-12, and it does not seem like they are close, but it does feel like the Pac-2 versus the Pac-10 is moving in the right direction. And we found out today that there is a court date set for November. I just don't believe it ever gets there, mainly because the remaining 2 members of the Pac-12, Oregon State and Washington State, just can't afford to go that long without a schedule, without stability, without an idea of what their future looks like, what the reality of their future looks like. I think that's the biggest deal. But, Jake, it just seems like sooner or later, for the sake of Washington State and Oregon State, they've got to get this case settled and fast.
Yeah, I think it's as soon as possible. I think that there's really no other option. I mean, again, the idea that you don't have schedules, you don't have logistics, you don't have anything sort of on paper and planned out, I think is difficult. And they can sit here, Oregon State and Washington State, and try to play tough and try to, play their hand the best they can. But the reality of the situation is they don't have the leverage here. Because, again, the 10 schools that left for their respective conferences are exactly that. They're in a new home. They are taken care of. They've got what they need. Now, obviously, this fight, if you will, this conversation, this dispute is over the assets of the Pac-12 and the money that's remaining in the conference and what to do with that money and how it's allocated and who gets what. And so the problem here is that these 2 schools, Washington State and Oregon State, are up against the clock, because the reality is you can't get to January, February, March and not have a schedule for that coming season. I mean, what are you just going to throw something together? That's not how scheduling works. I mean, You're talking about having to create a schedule with your TV partners, with other schools, obviously, in a matter of what, a couple of months, weeks. Like, I mean, it's never that fast of a process. I mean, there's so much to it. And that's why I say this is a really big problem, again, for what remains of this conference. And I'm telling you, as you watch all this Pac-12 or Pac-2, whatever you want to call it, stuff play out, remember these times and remember what goes down in this situation, because in 4 or 5 years, when we're working on the ACC situation, I'm sure we will see shades in that situation of this one. And I can only imagine, if you're Kirk Schultz at Washington State, you're sitting here trying to find the most efficient solution. So what does a settlement between these 2 look like? A settlement out of court and kind of coming together to figure it out. I'm not quite sure what that looks like. I'm not sure how you sort of come together and what you agree on. Because if I'm the 10 schools that left, I know I have the hammer. I know I'm going to lean on them and make it tough on them. And if you're those 2, you know that that's a situation. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know where you go.
Well, and I think these 2 schools, the biggest issue for them is right and wrong has nothing to do with it, as it was explained to me today. Right and wrong has nothing to do with it. Oregon State and Washington State, by most people's opinion, are entitled to the cash and assets remaining in the Pac-12 based on the charter and based on the bylaws of the Pac-12. The problem is that's absolutely worthless when your life quite literally is on the clock. And Oregon State and Washington State are frozen in time. They can't really make schedules. They can't really plan logistics, because if they don't know who they're going to be in business with a year from now, if they don't know where they're going to be affiliated a year from now, they're not going to have a TV deal. They're not going to have the ability to schedule every one of their sports, not just football and basketball. The 10 exiting members absolutely have the hammer. And if, in fact, our sourcing is correct, and it's been rock solid, Oregon State and Washington State want to settle this, and they want to settle it now. And it'll be interesting to see what they are willing to give. And my guess is it is simply a matter of how much money is it going to cost Oregon State and Washington State to settle this. That's what it comes down to. There is a lot of debt to be relieved in this conference. There are legal matters, including the Holiday Bowl versus the Pac-12 and UCLA. There's just all of this stuff hanging over the conference that is frozen in time unless these two different entities, the 10 exiting members, Oregon State and Washington State, can come to an agreement. And the 10 exiting members have about 75% of the leverage here. And it's really this continuing theme of Oregon State and Washington State have nothing to hang on to. They quite literally are twisting in the wind at the mercy of Father Time, and I don't know how you fix it. Because if Oregon State and Washington State wind up giving away a fair bit of the cash that remains in the coffers of the Pac-12, it is a doomsday scenario for Washington State athletics. I think Oregon State's on better footing, but you look at what's going on at Washington State, their staff and faculty want to completely redo the budget there.
Yeah, I wonder why.
And you have litigation there. Like you have all this stuff hanging over their heads. And it's really unfortunate. They need to get this done and move on as quickly as possible. And I don't know that these 10 exiting members are going to give them a chance to do that.
Well, yeah, and I just don't know why, if you're the 10 exiting members, respectfully, why you care all that much where they're able to go or what they're able to do. Now, this is that classic scenario of like, well, you sort of caused this on them. One person's going to say that. The other person's going to say, well, yes and no. I mean, yeah, sure, us leaving created a byproduct of them having, nowhere to go outside the Mountain West, but whose fault really is it that they're in that position? I mean, it's their own fault because, again, they didn't have power in what was the Pac-12. And so I think that's what's difficult here. You have a lot of converging opinions. You have a lot of people who look at this situation a lot of different ways.
Yep.
And the unfortunate truth here is that the clock is ticking. And there are 10 schools who are taken care of and are simply, in my opinion, playing with house money in a sense where it's like, hey, we're on the greener pastures. We got a good situation. I don't care what Kyle Whittingham says up at Utah about the Big Ten. You're going to the Big 12 right now, and that's where you're going, and that's fine. You don't have to necessarily stress on what you get out of this. You just want to get the most, whereas these other two are like, dude, we got to have this to survive. We got to have everything that we can get. And by the way, every day that goes by that you haven't settled, we're still waiting on your plan to survive and what you're going to do with the Mountain West.
Yeah, and I think, and I've talked a lot about this on the show. There's no doubt in my mind that the best alternative, the best avenue forward is for the Pac-12 brand to remain intact and for the Mountain West to come under and live under that brand and have Commissioner Navarez run that league. That is the best possible outcome for both Oregon State and Washington State, and frankly, the Mountain West Conference as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very good for Oregon State. I think Oregon State would do very well in that conference. Hell, look at what Washington State's doing in the Pac-12 this year. I think it's a really good situation for both. But to do that, you need the 10 exiting members of the conference to play ball, and they need to play ball now. Because if this gets into November and there's more delays in discovery and motions and delays of any kind, you're just tightening the grips on the remaining two members, and it's untenable for them. And I think one of the other things that we need to address really, directly, I don't know how many other ways I can say this. Washington State and Oregon State do not have a path to go to the Big 12.
Yeah.
That does not exist. And we have worked this story. We have talked to sources at both schools in the conference. There is quite literally nobody in a position of authority or in the know who has said these entities have spoken. ESPN is not lobbying the Big 12 to add Oregon State and Washington State. They're not. And I don't know where this story comes from, and I understand that there's a bunch of podcasts out there that are trying to get attention. You guys, I'm telling you, we have spoken to so many people involved with this. Nobody sees that happening. They have not spoken. The last time that Oregon State had direct communication with the Big 12 was when the conference fell apart. And Scott Barnes and other administrators at Oregon State were reaching out to the Big Ten and were reaching out to the Big 12, and the answer was an unequivocal, sorry, but we're not interested. And that has not changed. I was told directly today that the Big 12 has zero interest in Oregon State and Washington State. And I just don't see how that would change. I don't see what leverage anybody would have over the Big 12 to make them take two schools that bring absolutely no value to them.
Yeah, and I think that the hard part for Oregon State fan or Washington State fan to kind of grapple with is that the Big 12 is primed to go hunting when the ACC becomes available. That's the sad reality of, your situation. Again, I even said when the conference was burning down, dude, Oregon State and the Big 12 would be an outstanding fit, in my opinion. Both because it's the Pacific time zone, you have new facilities, you're going in the right direction. By the way, you've got a 10-win football program. Basketball program needs a little bit of love, but we're going in the right direction. Like, there are a lot of things to like about Oregon State. It's not an Oregon State issue specifically, and that's where I think people get confused. A lot of people want to say, oh, well, it's an Oregon State and Washington State issue that they're not in the Big 12. Well, no, not necessarily. It is a landscape issue. It is a, hey, I'm Brett Yormark. I prioritize going after the big boys in the ACC over you. And I prioritize the Four Corners schools over you. And that's just the choice he made, to which brings me back to the point I was making. This is a cutthroat business. This is a, hey, does 1 + 1 = 2? And unfortunately for Washington State, it did not. And unfortunately for Oregon State, it did not.
Well,
and
I think it also goes back to this idea that, winning on the field is what matters. If that were the case when the ACC, in the Calford drama was going on, if that were the case, the ACC would have taken Oregon State and Washington State and taken all four. But the ACC was unequivocal in their denial of Oregon State and Washington State. They were not interested because the geography doesn't work. The issue really is the monetary value that Oregon State and Washington State bring to the ACC or the Big 12, and there isn't any. That's the hardest part. It is almost nothing to do with the job that Jonathan Smith has done at Oregon State or Research Stadium, or it just doesn't matter that Washington State is winning on the field. In this particular situation, you can't look at Stanford and say, man, Stanford's terrible athletically. We better take Oregon State. That's not how this game is played. And I know we've debated this at length and ad nauseum. It just doesn't matter. The Big 12 is in a position where they know significant realignment is coming. The instability in the ACC is a huge problem for college football and college basketball in general. And I say that because conferences like the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12 are all sitting there waiting for the ACC to do whatever it's going to do. And when it does, none of those teams want to be at 20. Those teams want to be at 16 and 18 so that they can make a move. I can only tell you so many times I've been told repeatedly by sources close to the Big 10 that they want Notre Dame and North Carolina in the Big 10. That's who they want at 20, period. That's why Stanford and Cal did not get into the Big 10, because the Big 10 far more values Notre Dame and North Carolina. The bigger question is, are North Carolina and North Carolina State a team? It does not appear that way based on how expansion voting went. But you can't possibly believe that the Big 12 is going to, I was asked the other day in a radio interview, is the Big 12 going to step up and do the right thing?
What do you mean the right thing?
But that's my point. What do you mean the right thing? What is the right thing for the Big 12? Is it the right thing to add Oregon State and Washington State? No, it's not. Not in any way, shape, or form. Not when you have access to, I think, one of the better revenue-generating opportunities in college sports with the way that the Big 12 is building itself. Why are you going to take that risk when you already have Utah, BYU, Arizona, and Arizona State? Why are you going to add 2 more members that do business together well? That's 6 members of the former Pac-12 in one conference. Do you really think that's good for business if you're Oklahoma State, if you're Kansas, K-State? Why would you do that? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think that's also one of the reasons that when ESPN went to the Big 12, ESPN went to the Big 12 and said, hey, we'd like to, explore having Stanford and Cal join the Big 12. The Big 12 said, no, absolutely not.
No.
We're not interested.
Well, and I love the assertion that, and again, this is no shade at Oregon State or Washington State. Again, I keep saying this. It has nothing really to do with them on a personal level, if you will. Dude, the concept of, hey, is the Big 12 going to do the right thing? Almost the assertion of they owe it to these 2 schools. Dude, nobody owes anybody anything. I mean, yeah. Dude, the only thing that you're owed is what you've earned. And that's what nobody wants to say about any of these schools in realignment, right? Hell, say it about Colorado and Prime. The only thing you deserve is what you've earned. And now you got to re-earn everyone's respect. So I just look at this thing with the Big 12 and I say, man, like they are going to do what's best for the conference. How many times does Brett Yormark have to come out and say, hey, it's me and the presidents in my conference or the member institutions are in alignment. If I have an idea about how I think we should take this conference forward, if I think that would help the conference, I'm going to take it to them first and see what they think. So do you really think that Brett's just out here like adding schools at random and they haven't talked about it? Yeah. Or they haven't worked together to decide like who's a good fit and who's not, and honestly what's palatable and what's not? Because I guarantee you nobody wants to do business with Kirk Schultz. Like, why would you ever expose yourself or attach your success to a guy like Kirk Schultz?
Yeah, I just don't think you would.
You wouldn't.
And I furthermore, I look at the conference the way it is constructed now. You have a very strong conference. I mean, you look at, even in a down year, Texas Tech is exceptionally valuable. You look at Baylor, Okie State. This conference dominates the state of Texas, even without Texas, because you're adding Houston. I think UCF was a great add. I am not in the camp that believes Cincinnati has massive value, but you understand based on the success that Luke Fickell had there, and their brand as a basketball university, like you have a really good slate of teams. And I think adding Oregon State and Washington State, I think is a risk to that.
Yeah.
And I don't know why you would do that, because imagine if you could get the Virginia schools. Imagine, you look at the ACC and you look at some of the vulnerable teams in that conference. If you're the Big 12, would you rather have Virginia Tech? Would you rather have, Miami's probably an SEC school. Florida State, I would think, would like to be in the Big 10. But Louisville makes a lot of sense for the Big 12. Those are old friends, right? I look at Virginia. I look at Pitt. Wake Forest probably isn't a great fit in the Big 12. But, there's a lot of value currently in the ACC. If that, let's pretend the stories are true, which I don't think they are, that Clemson is announcing here in 2 weeks that they're going to melt down the ACC. Are you adding Oregon State and Washington State to kill your flexibility when that happens? I doubt it. No. I seriously doubt it. So I think that narrative needs to go away. It needs to go away. And I think that when you look at this situation, the main question with the Pac-12 is, will the Pac-12 be a viable conference a year from now? And I think it will. I think the brand is going to live on. And I think one of the more interesting questions, let's pretend the ACC melts down.
Yeah.
What happens to Stanford and Cal? It's a really interesting question.
Do you not revert back to what allegedly is going to be the Pac-12 with the Mountain West? Do you not, and again, earlier in the week, we talked all about the automatic qualifier portion of the Pac-12 situation and, the 5-7, 6-6 debate with the college football playoff. So if, let's say that the Pac-12 survives and they retain their auto bid, if you're Calford and the ACC melts down, I would think you would just go back, but I don't know.
I would think.
Again, unfortunately, let's run it right back. Hey, how much value to TV partners does Calford have? I have to imagine they have some value. I don't know if it's enough to justify it. But again, in that situation, I think you're in an even worse spot than you were when you were trying to join the ACC. I mean, at that point now we've chopped off another conference from the slate. So that's why I say, like, it's a dangerous game out here. And I think the point you make, winning is the only thing that fixes all. Dude, if you win, you're going to garner more respect nationally. You're going to get more love from the TV partners, and you're going to be able to punch your own ticket. And that's just the reality of it, man.
Yeah, and I think if you were truly going to the Big 12, why would you put yourself through this mess in court? That's the other thing that nobody wants to talk about. Like, if you were in the position that Oregon State and Washington State find themselves in, and you were going to join the Big 12, why would you be suing? I mean, why would you be suing? Because for me, it's so expensive. Like, the money you are pissing away right now on lawyers, it's significant, because they didn't hire like Jimmy straight out of Stanford Law. They're working with, they're working with significant attorneys. You look at the money that Oliver Luck is making, like, they're spending a ton of money because they want to keep the Pac-12 brand alive, right? You wouldn't sue the exiting 10 members simply because they wanted to vote to split the shares equally by 12. You wouldn't sue if you were going to the Big 12. Why would you go through all it?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it makes absolutely no sense for Oregon State and Washington State to put themselves through this unbelievable headache that they are going through. It'll be interesting to see exactly what we end up with here, because these exiting 10 members know they have the leverage. They absolutely know they have the leverage. So we shall see. All right, less of us, more of you after we hit our daily buckshot right here on the Monty Show. The official energy provider of the Monty Show every single day is Bucked Up Energy, and you guys have been banging the promo code Monty20 to get 20% off at checkout. Buckshot again restocked, and we have sold a ton of Buckshot on this show. So many of our viewers have found out how great this product is. It's 200 milligrams of caffeine in a bottle full of brain food. That's really what this is. And what do I tell you every single day on the show? Bucked Up makes really high-quality products with high-quality ingredients that do exactly what they say they're going to do. And what do they say that Buckshot does? It's 200 milligrams of caffeine that gives you long-lasting energy to power you through the rest of your day. Cheers to you, friends. That's the watermelon. My two favorite flavors are watermelon and blue raz. Get them all today right now at buckedup.com. And once you use that promo code, what you're going to see is Buckshot's already on sale. You save $2 a box. So when you use the promo code Monty20, you save a ton of money off of your entire order. And I again thought about talking about this on the show today. So I lost another pound. You know, we went to California. I gained 2 pounds. We're going to Hawaii here in about 5.5 weeks. I've got about 20-something pounds to lose in that time. Really hitting the protein shakes hard. Really trying to be active. Really trying to burn on my Ferrari of a new Apple Watch.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys can you guys see that or not? Let's go
yeah, okay.
There you go. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
The Apple Watch Ultra is so much better than
Can you measure it?
Apple Watch. It's amazing. But I've really worked hard to keep my calories down. So to do that, you need to be satiated, not as hungry. Get the whey protein isolate. Make sure you get your 6-point creatine. Make sure you get your collagen peptides. Let's rock and roll. Bucked Up, the official energy provider of the Monty Show. T. Lawrence says mental clarity. Indeed.
Damn right.
Christopher Shannon says Ozempic. Yeah, I can't do it, man. I'm not doing that. I with all due respect to everybody who have, I'm not doing it. Daniel Dixon says, I have lost 10 pounds. Way to go.
Let's go, baby.
Let's go. Conference Commissioner Gumby, Timex Indiglo greater than Apple Watch, dude. This Apple Watch Ultra is unbelievable. The battery lasts forever, and it's so much more accurate on your calories burned It's amazing. It is amazing. J.K. Marshall, Indiglo, my favorite. I had an Indiglo back in the day. Tanner Plummer, Ozempic. No. Can't do it. Can't do it. Cannot do it. All right, let's get your thoughts in here. Let me go back up towards the top because I see a lot of you commenting.
First,
Let's see. Who is in? Christopher Shannon says, get real. Those two aren't Mountain West Conference. You mean Oregon State, Washington State? I think it'd really be a wise move for them to do that. I think it makes a lot of sense to have that conference stay together. I think there's a lot of money in it. Let's see. Don Juan says, Monty, you're wrong. Very well could be.
Wow. Man.
Connor Johnson, a noted Beavers fan. The other conferences are going to push for it. $300 million to be spread across the P4. Push for what?
Yeah, what do you mean?
I don't know what he means. Mike Smith, how are you, my friend? Nobody is saying they've spoken. You keep saying that, but that is not what they are saying.
Then what are they saying?
I am so out of sequence. Let's see. Aaron Wilson says, first as always. By the way, Aaron, thank you for giving another membership away on the show. Thank you. Gary Wolf says, I've had too much experience with angry beavers. The silent treatment and bologna sandwiches is worse than death. I liked bologna sandwiches when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know. Conference Commissioner Gumby, financial footprint issues. I think that's a huge factor for Oregon State and Washington State. I also think Kirk Schultz is not well respected around college sports. And I think that plays a role here. I really do. I think Kirk Schultz does not have the best reputation in the world.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys that was speaking loudest about the great media deal the Pac-12 was going to get.
Okay. So that's how it's going to be.
So, Mike Smith, again, nobody is saying that they've talked to the Big 12. Nobody is saying that ESPN has talked to the Big 12. They are speculating that if the Pac-12 wins the battle, it might make for a scenario to add. No. In fact, that's not what's being reported. And I can tell you, I must have 30 DMs on it. I had a TV station in Portland reach out to me and ask me about it. Like, there are reports out, and I don't know where it started. I think one of the podcasts, I think Locked On Pac-12, which whatever you want to call Locked On Pac-12, it is what it is. They're the ones that started it. They did some kind of conversation where they said, hey, this is happening. And it's not a matter of, I think the phraseology was, it's not a matter of if, but when Oregon State and Washington State get an invite to the Big 12.
No.
And it's like, okay, hey man, it is what it is. And I have talked to so many people in these situations who've said that's just not an option.
It just doesn't make sense.
In the
That's
Big 12.
issue. I'm all for getting creative and thinking outside the box and everything. I'm all for that. But it's got to make sense. There's got to be some logic behind it, and I just don't think that there's a lot of logic following that line of thinking.
Yeah. There's no, the thing that makes it there's no financial gain for the Big 12 with Oregon State and Washington State.
Yeah.
There's no gain in reach with Oregon State and Washington State. Not when you have the flexibility to add much larger brands down the road. And I keep going back to the Big 12 and 20 teams. Man, I'm telling you, 20 is a number that it causes chaos. Like the money that you have to invest in humans and infrastructure just to facilitate 20 universities and their entire sports infrastructure. Let that sink in. 20 rowing teams, 20 soccer teams. Like, it's a lot of work. And then trying to get media rights on 20 baseball teams and trying to put tournaments together and sanctioning. And it's massive. It is massive. Think about how much bigger Big 12 football media days would be with 20 teams.
As if it wasn't big enough already.
I mean, it just, it'd better be premium brands that you're adding. That's why you understood UConn and Gonzaga, or you understand, like I've heard the Virginia schools a lot would be really attractive to the Big 12. Good pairing with West Virginia, like you feel like, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
It gives you a much larger DMA, like television advertising marketplace. Like it gives you reach into DC. It gives you reach into districts where there's a lot of wealth and a lot of money. The alumni have a lot of wealth and a lot of money. Like it makes a lot of sense. Washington State and Oregon State bring none of that. And you got to deal with Kirk Schultz. Like there's just, I think there's far more value in the Pac-12 surviving. There's far more value in it.
Yeah.
And I still maintain there's got to be an avenue for Gonzaga to join the Big 12 as a basketball only. And I understand that Gonzaga doesn't want to do that.
Gonzaga.
I get it. But the WCC is a fantastic league, but they're at their ceiling there. You either want to be an elite basketball program in this country or you're going to stay in the WCC. And questions will be asked repeatedly. Well, is Mark Few really that much of a program builder? And he'll continue to play, P5 schools on battleships, which I think was spectacular last year with Michigan State. Gonzaga and their fan base deserves better than that.
Yeah.
There has to be an avenue. And I think if the Pac-12 survives, I could see Gonzaga being involved in that. But there's just so much more relevance and revenue to be made with other partners. And I'm not slighting Oregon State or Washington State.
It's just not there.
It's like, just there. There's no there.
What are we talking about with these two? Like, it's a convenient thing to say, oh, yeah, they're eventually going to get an invite. Okay, well, and eventually I'm going to be 100. Great. Like, who cares? It's not, there's no substance to it. It doesn't make financial sense. That's why I say we can all bark at the wind, but nothing's changing with that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly how all of this shakes out, because I'm with Kyle Whittingham, what he said the other day. This is just the beginning. We're not near the end of the road of college football and college athletic realignment. I don't think we're anywhere near it. I think, and if you missed it, Kyle Whittingham the other day was talking about, the UCLA and Utah, and that they were going to be, in a relationship together again. And I think it's really interesting that I agree with him 100%. Does that mean that UCLA and Utah are going to be in the Big Ten together? Maybe. Yeah, I mean, absolutely could be. But I don't think we know what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
I truly don't. And
you have to see what the implications of the ACC meltdown are.
It's just, Oregon State is too good of an institution, academically and athletically, to toil like this. But you are who you run with. And right now, I think it was just the wrong place at the wrong time for Oregon State.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because I think
damn good brand.
It really is, but you're not the biggest. You're massively overshadowed by Oregon. Right? And if you think about Portland, Eugene, like you think about that television market, Oregon State and Corvallis doesn't pull that market. It doesn't deliver that market. This is SMU in Dallas.
Yeah.
It does not help you market-wise. I look at Boise and Boise State. I mean, one of the original BCS busters with Utah. Where did that get them? Did not get them a big conference invite. Sadly, I think that's where Oregon State is. And if you're an Oregon State fan, I think you need to be hoping that the Pac-12 brand survives this year. Because if a year from now the Pac-12 is still a conference and that merger happens, which they just got to get through this court process, but it cannot take 3 months.
Yeah, seriously.
We cannot turn the calendar to 2024 because the Mountain West is not just going to chill and hang out and wait for Oregon State and Washington State.
Nope.
A settlement, I think that's why they're working so hard on a settlement. And damn, I'm telling you, Oregon State deserves better. It's just you're a victim of circumstance, and I don't know how you fix that. I really don't know how you fix that, seriously. And I really wonder how all that goes. Mike Smith, again, they think it will happen, but they are not reporting that. They have inside sources saying they have talked with the Big 12 or the Big 12 has sent out invites.
Oh, you're talking about, I see what you're saying. He's talking about the other podcast. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. This is going to sound elitist, and if you don't think I'm an a-hole, you're probably going to think I'm an a-hole now. I don't watch other podcasts. I'll be honest with you. I don't. You know when all that died for me? When John Canzano started being John Canzano and just making stuff up. Just in my opinion, yeah, I think John Canzano made a bunch of stuff up and was a complete embarrassment. That's where my podcasting days ended.
Don't you know who I am?
I will not listen to podcasts. I don't. And it's really difficult for me. We tried to listen to Locked On, but when Neighbors got fired at Locked On Big 12, that whole network died, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was a bad look.
I just think they so terribly mishandled that. I watched 365, but sparingly. Frankly, they're on when we're on, and I don't have time to go back and watch it.
Yeah, we met them at Big 12 Media Days. They're a bunch of nice guys, you know.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know Josh Neighbors. I don't know those guys. But the funny thing is, there's podcasts, and I hope you guys embrace this for what it is. Don't read anything into my comments. I'm speaking as frankly as I can speak. The word podcast is a dirty word. Everybody and their brother has a podcast. And it's why we do not do podcasts. It's why we don't do a podcast, because we work very hard to bring you good information. And I think if you followed us through realignment, if there was somebody more accurate on realignment than we were, hey, congratulations. But we've worked really hard to build a reputation. We've worked really hard to get guys on this show. We don't do a lot of interviews unless it's Will Howard, who's going to join us here in 19 minutes from K-State. Unless it's a principal guy like that, and Alema Harrington talking about BYU, a guy who played. I'm not putting podcast host on the show.
Yeah.
Because there's just so little credibility in it. And I just think it's become this fight where people are like, oh, all you guys do is clickbait. Fucking right, that's all we do is clickbait. Because and what people don't understand is our job is to get you, if you've never seen our show, to watch our show. Judge after that. If we're credible, if we're not credible, if we're right or we're not right, whatever. Our job is to get you to watch the show.
Facts.
And I think if you look at our rate of retention, we've done a really good job with that. The tough part comes in is when you have dudes throwing stuff against the wall, using their opinion and stating it as fact. Hey, people, I watched that episode where he talked about the Big 12 adding Oregon State and Washington State. And Mike Smith, if that's what you're talking about, I'm not completely sure. It's really hard for me to follow the conversation through. But what I'm telling you is that what you saw on that podcast was those two dudes, and I think it was Locked On Pac-12, I'm not sure. Those two dudes straight up said, the invitation is coming. It's not a matter of if, but when Oregon State and Washington State join the Big 12.
Congratulations, but that's bullshit.
And I can tell you, we've talked to sources about that who laughed at that. Just straight up chuckled at it. That's what makes our job so much more difficult.
Yeah.
And it is a real bummer. It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree that the word podcast has changed in legitimacy over the years. I mean, it used to be that God. Podcast was like, oh, you do a podcast? Wow, Joe Rogan's everything. And then Joe got in some trouble at Spotify for some things, and then the word podcast kind of got diluted, and then everybody and their mom did a podcast, and then you've got guys like us who've been doing a show for 10 years now and only been on YouTube for 2 years and have damn near 40,000 subs, and we're just working on the craft. We're just doing a good show, bringing you the best we can, and it's like what we do. We don't
This
have
isn't
a
a
day
hobby
job,
for us.
dude. Like, and that's what I think is tough, you know. And I think, you know, in the college football space, like I can tell you firsthand, and you guys probably know this, is not reinventing the wheel, but man, college football fans are vicious. They are out for it, and that's what I think makes some of these conversations difficult. Is
But
there's so much emotion.
Isn't that what was fascinating? I tried to save you there.
Thanks.
But isn't that what was fascinating about Big 12 Football Media Day?
Yeah.